Hello everybody, Norman here, and welcome to my speedrun of the game Butt for the PC. Not only is this a speedrun, but as of today, December 15th, 2018, this is the world record for fastest time completing the game. That is scoring 10,000 points and getting to the final cutscene. So yes, you will see we get a time of 28 minutes and 51 seconds, which of course bested the old world record by Norwegian butt runner Felipe Jarlsberg, who ran butt with a time of 29 minutes and 3 seconds. So I'm really excited to have gotten a sub 29 time. I'll fill you in as we go of all the kind of techniques and exploits and strats that we use here in speedrunning the game, as well as a little history about the game, kind of what it's all about, if anyone's not familiar with this title. But it is pretty well known. So anyway, yes, in Butt, as you can see, you take control of the titular Butt, and there's a storm cloud above you that drops down various items, and you have to fart to bounce those items to either the spittoon on the left or the trash can on the right. Kind of similar to the old Atari game Kaboom. Very good game. Very difficult, very challenging, but very satisfying to run. Now, just a little history about the game, because this game does have kind of a fascinating history behind it. And I'm just going to read this off of Kellerpedia.org. This is regarding, of course, the mastermind behind this game, Jeremy Kellerman. So the article on Kellerpedia.org about Butt reads, in 1983, future local access television host and all-around creativity virtuoso Jeremy Kellerman was finishing his BA in communications at Wanatshah Community College in Dearborn, Michigan. Of course, 3 short years later, he would achieve his certification of advertising from Dream Changers Personal Empowerment School of Melville, Indiana, now defunct. And in 1988, he would go on to host the famed TV series, The Jeremy Kellerman Advice Hour. The rest is history. However, there's another story from Kellerman's formative years that has gone untold until today. Not satisfied with merely obtaining his degree, Jeremy Kellerman was already testing the limits of his incredible creative powers by dabbling in video game programming and design. In March of that year, he set to work on what would become a brilliant project sadly lost to the ages. Until now. Inspired by the classics of that era, such as Pong, Pac-Man, and Rampaging Death Ape, Kellerman developed a project he dubbed The Angelic Struggle. A deceptively simple yet addictive game, it featured an angel of positivity using the bellows of self-empowerment to repel the onslaught of materialism waged by the clouds of despair. The game is interspersed with educational and inspirational information about famous philosophers and spiritual leaders, and other pertinent information predating the 1990s edutainment craze by over 10 years. Matching simple game mechanics with an epic spiritual storyline, The Angelic Struggle became an instant hit with beta tester and Kellerman's roommate, David Munson. However, Kellerman programmed the game on his trusty Rubendo 5000 personal computational device and saved the master and subter files on a Bolognatronics SOG-E flopping diskette, aka the infamous Bologna disk, released briefly in 1982 by fast food chain Bologna Hut. The game was ultimately lost due to the incompatibility of those devices with virtually every piece of technology invented before or since. After the death of Kellerman's beloved wife, journalist and co-host Victoria Kellerman, in 1996 the original equipment was lost and The Angelic Struggle was forgotten. In 2014, Jeremy Kellerman's nephew, Scott Kellerman, discovered the original Bologna disc, containing the game files stored in a box of collectible ceramic puppies and politically incorrect antique figurines from the antebellum South. Fascinated by the disc's bizarre history and with his uncle's blessing, Scott turned the disc over to his friend Johnny Weinstein, a local computer whiz. Against all odds, the young Mr. Weinstein was able to bring together the correct components to interface with the obscure, antiquated baloney disc and import the original game files to a modern personal computer. With the original coding miraculously intact, Johnny Weinstein and Scott Kellerman decided not to let the 30-year-old effort go to waste, and resolved to finish and release the game themselves. Under the supervision of Jeremy Kellerman, the game was updated in various ways. Upon Scott's suggestion, the game title was changed from The Angelic Struggle to simply Butt, a name he believes, quote, resonates with the edgier, hip youth culture of today, end quote. To reflect the title change, the sprites of the player character were also redesigned entirely. A professional pixel artist was called in to redesign another character. Originally referred to as the self-actualized self, now the character is entirely new, featuring a pulse-pounding sci-fi/western backstory based on Scott's market research into modern gaming. Lastly, the original educational/informational sections of the game were expanded to reflect the changes in the world since the game was originally created 3 decades ago. Lead programmer and restoration director Johnny Weinstein had this to say, quote, I think the game is fantastic and it holds up remarkably well for something originally created in 1983. In terms of gameplay alone, it could stand alongside many classics of that era. It was a lot of fun to work on, too, and I enjoyed adding in the updated educational sequences, though some stuff appeared by itself since I started working on it, and I can't explain that. Frankly, it's spooky. It's as if the program itself was alive and evolving of its own volition since we reactivated it. I haven't been this creeped out since Jeremy did that children's show with the plate thing. Maybe we should study this thing some more before we release it. Graphic design restoration director Scott Kellerman added, quote, You're worrying too much. Let's just get this thing out there and maybe make some money. I want to buy me some Uggs. I bet those old racist figurines in the basement are worth something too. But Scott, I don't think it's normal for shut up and go eat a hot dog, nut warbler. Jeremy Kellerman concluded with this statement. I'm delighted that The Angelic Struggle is finally going to be released after all this time. I just know that it will become part of the collective consciousness the same way my inspiring television series, The Jeremy Kellerman Advice Hour, did. Now there will be a whole new way for people to see their own inner potential, and a whole new avenue for people to discover the creative genius and wellspring of pure creativity that is Kellerman. Think well, live well, and be well. Jeremy Kellerman. So I know that was a mouthful, but that was the entire article on Butt on Kellerpedia. I just think it's got such a fascinating backstory, and oh yeah, as you've obviously realized by now, this commentary is of course being done in post, just because this game requires such concentration that trying to play the game, let alone speedrun it and get a world record while commenting just ain't in the cards. That's an awful tall order. You know, maybe someday someone will be capable, but it's not this guy. Right, so some of the techniques we're using here, you could see it at some parts before there's an item dropped that my butt will kind of follow underneath the cloud in short bursts of movement. In the butt speedrunning community, this is called under-tracking, or just maybe tracking, it's referred to. And basically it's to keep your butt under the cloud but slightly off-center of it, because that is the ideal place to be when it drops an item. Because of course you want to hit the item off-center so you knock it to either the left or the right. Otherwise, you can just knock it straight up, and that's very bad. That's called a dead juggle. And you don't want a dead juggle, because that can just ruin your run. And of course, you see here, when you grab a power pellet, you turn into the self-actualized self that that cowboy bird thing with the gun, and you shoot an onslaught of items that the cloud drops. You automatically hit them. You don't need to aim at them or anything, and that racks up a lot of points. Now, every so often, when you get so many points, you earn another respect, and respects are basically your lives. So you can see right now I have 16, so I've got 16 lives there. I've got a score of 1,537 excellence, of course, and the run ends on time when your excellence, well, not really when they reach 10,000, but it ends when you grab the final power pellet that initiates the last cutscene of the game. Now, another technique you'll kind of see me utilize here is even when there is nothing on the screen, I will be just kind of constantly, pushing the fart button and farting. This is called line farting, or sometimes runners just refer to it as LFing. And basically the purpose of it is to kind of give you more of a visual guide to help line up your butt with the center or the off-center of the cloud. It just gives you kind of a bit of a vertical marker that just really assists in positioning yourself. Another thing you'll notice is the items, they're all kind of different sizes and shapes, and this does have a big effect on how hard it is to bounce certain items, or miss certain items. And the items are generally divided into 3 tiers, Tier 1 being the most difficult, Tier 2 being moderately difficult, and Tier 3 being not very difficult at all. And generally, runners have categorized the items as follows. Tier 1, the most difficult, would include the apron, the clip, the boodle, the valentine, and the basketball. Tier 2, the moderately difficult tier, this is where most of the items fall. Tier 2 includes the nut, time, teddy, football, package, beer, God's dish, ring, bowling ball, Sabrina's Amiga, Gita, cookie, plumpkin, sword, tape, crabbit, Play-Doh, genie, and the smiley emoticon. Note, however, that the smiley emoticon, if dropped on this stage here with the purple background, is considered Tier 1 because it blends in so much with the background. It is practically invincible. And Tier 3, of course, being the not very difficult tier, you've only got 4 items here. That is the Kiss, Roger Nimrockets, Spoot, and Dash. So you can see we're doing pretty good here. Just there on the left, you'll see what we refer to as a free drop when the Sabrina's Amiga just went right into the spittoon there. A free drop is, of course, when the cloud just drops an item directly over one of the receptacles and you don't even have to do anything. It just goes right in. Excuse me. So yeah, you want to get a lot of free drops. Some runs you'll get more than others. The RNG can really make or break you a lot in this game, which is why not a lot of people run it, is because just, so much is left up to the RNG. But there is a definitive skill component to this game as well. You can see we missed that peanut there. It was my error, you just can't save them all. So you can see there we got the smiley emoticon, bounced it right there to the left. We are juggling the time and the God's dish here. Juggling, of course, is the act of keeping 2 items off of the ground at once. When you've got 2 items on the screen at the same time. So you can see, we were going to juggle the cookie and the bowling ball, but then we lost the cookie. So we're juggling the rose and the bowling ball until we lost the rose there, the apron. Not sure on some of the naming of the items in this game, but I'm sure Kellerman knew what he was doing when he programmed this. I know him, he's an interesting guy, very smart cookie. So, if there's something, in the game or anything he does, it's done on purpose. He's like Stanley Kubrick in that way. There, of course, is one of the edutainment cutscenes that's interspersed. Some of them tend to go a little off the rails later on in the game, but, overall, it's a very educational game. Let's see here, we're just going along, we're up to 2,529. There's the dash, that's of course one of the tier 3 items, one of the less difficult. There's the clip, of course one of the tier 1 items. Some of the other jargon that you might hear used in speedrunning of butt are, let's see here. If you hear someone referring to the tune, that's just referring to the spittoon on the left. Or the can is just referring to the trash can on the right. Very nice rose bounce, or apron bounce right there into the tune. And we've got the ring, also going to the left to the tune. Coming up on 3,000 relatively soon here, so we'll be almost about a third of the way in. You can see there we got 2 Valentines in a row. If you get generally 3 or more difficult items in a row, like 3 tier 1 items in a row, you'll hear that referred to as a screw chain. Or, you could hear it like, oh man, I got totally screw chained, right there when those 3 clips dropped or something. Of course, the opposite of a screw chain, runners call a mercy chain, which is the exact same thing but with tier 3 items instead of tier 1. So it's getting a bunch of easy items in a row. Generally agreed to be 3 or more. Sometimes you'll also hear an item referred to as being dead. Now, when a dropped item is referred to as dead, it means that whatever the circumstances, it's already a lost cause. There's really nothing you can do to save it. Most common scenario being when you're bouncing something over on one side of the screen and something difficult drops over on the opposite side of the screen, and it's just physically impossible for you to make it over in time, so, the item is dead, and sometimes you just gotta, cut and run, cut your losses and, leave some items. Which is why it's very important to stock up as many respects as you can in the early part of the game. Because later on, okay, we just passed the 1/3 mark, 3,300. So, we're getting there. We got some beer. And you'll notice with the beer there, we were doing what's called skimming. And skimming is basically when you kind of bounce an item along low to the ground, kind of making it move in a horizontal fashion rather quick. Of course, the opposite of skimming is simply called high bouncing. It's pretty self-explanatory, just shooting an item in a few bounces high up. Luckily, that apron was dropped close to the tune, so didn't have to do much to get it in. Another tier 1 item with the buttle there. Another term you'll hear, which I think we've seen in this run so far, is what's called a pass. And a pass, of course, is when an item traverses from one side of the screen to the other. That is, if you overshoot it over one of the receptacles and it doesn't go in and it just keeps flying across the screen, but you don't let it hit the ground and you bounce it, so it makes a complete trajectory from one side of the screen to the other. It's called a pass. You also have, like right here, there's going to be the God's Dish just passed. And you can also have what's called a double or even triple pass, which is, of course, pretty self-explanatory. It's when an item passes the screen more than once, Sometimes people will have butt trick shot contests, and they'll purposely go to see how many passes you can make on an item. I think Felipe Jarlsberg currently holds the record for a quintuple item pass, which was also done with a basketball, so that was very impressive. Really just speaks to Felipe's incredible skill as a butt runner, and I certainly learned almost everything I know from him in running this game, so got to give a shout out to him, my man, Felipe Jarlsberg. You taught me this game, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, so thank you. You can see there, racking up some more points with the self-actualized self-bird cowboy thing. That teddy looks suspiciously like the man in the bear suit from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Just a little disquieting, but it's those small disquieting touches that Kellerman adds to his media that I think really set him apart as an artist. As far as glitches go, there really aren't many glitches with this game, and the ones that do exist really don't assist that much in a speedrun. They're more used for, like we talked about, trick shot contests. You know, it's just where people try and, you know, do fancy maneuvers, not going for a high score. It's just, you know, seeing how many passes you can make, how many items you can juggle at once, how high you can hit an item. Now, we referred to when you bounce an item too hard to the left or right, and it flies to the left or right over one of the receptacles, you know, in a more horizontal fashion. That's called overshooting or an overshot. And of course, the opposite of that would be when you bounce an item upward too hard. Okay, so here we go. This is now where things get really difficult, because you can see we have a second cloud added in, so the drop rate significantly heightens. Now, the one good thing about this, though, is that with more items to bounce into the tune or the can, your score can also increase fast, especially here when you get the bird thing, because you shoot two sets of items at once. Excuse me. So, you know, as you can see, it requires some really intense concentration, but things speed up here. Score just, you know, really starts speeding up, and this is where stockpiling all those respects in the early game really comes into play here, because you're going to see me miss a lot of items, but we've got 21 respects at this point, which is a very good place to be at 5,800. The number of excellence we're currently at. Got a double plumpkin there going into the can. Bowling ball, the sword. One thing I forgot to mention is, I hate the rose so much. The rose is by far the worst item you can get. But one thing I forgot to mention is the hitboxes in this game are kind of wonky. The hitboxes seem to not be like a box or a polygon at all. The hitboxes seem to follow like the exact outline of how the item is drawn. Now, the reason I mention this is that this makes swords kind of deceptive in how easy/hard they are to bounce into a receptacle, because of their really oblong shape and kind of, you know, tapered blade that's really thin on the end. It can be easy to think it's going into one of the receptacles, you know, but then it rotates the wrong way and it just crashes to the ground like just a pixel short of the, like right there. You saw, I thought that might have gone in, but, you know, just too much stuff taking my attention, and it just rotated at the wrong angle. Who knows, if that sword would have rotated just a little bit differently, I could have had it in the can. As you can see, we got, I think that was, what, a double pass on the teddy, or just a pass, probably. We're skimming the biddle there. It was a very nice skim. You could see that one side of the screen to the other, straight into the can. Got the ring. That Teddy was dead. You know, nothing we could do about it. We overshot the Gita there, as you could see. And now we were trying to juggle 3 things at once. Didn't happen, but got a nice double juggle in. Very good. Tried to skim the package, but just wasn't happening. We should be getting another power pellet relatively soon. I think we've gone long enough, or we've racked up enough excellence that the next one should be coming. Always good to see good old N0rman Rockets there, since he's probably the easiest of all the items in Tier 3 to bounce, making him the easiest item in the entire game to bounce. So you can see we're at 7,168. So we are getting there. You know, it seems like it's going to take a long time, but once you hit this area with the double clouds of this section of the game, you will really notice your score pick up a lot. So I guess that's the one relieving thing about when that second cloud shows up. Items like the nut there, that they're kind of elongate. Oh yeah, see there we just got pellet. We got what's called pellet blocked. We were going to get a power pellet, but the next cutscene initiated, and you know what can you say? The RNG just boned us, and just wasn't in the cards for us. But that's okay because we still pull it out anyhow. But like I was saying about the nut, the kind of oblong items like that, like the nut and the sword and stuff, that fall lengthwise down toward you can be pretty difficult. Nice pass on the kiss there. You know, just because there's that much less of a surface area facing you on their downward trajectory to hit. Whereas you'll notice oblong items like the kiss, that falls broadside toward you, of course, is a lot easier to hit. The best example of that, of course, being the clip, like you just saw there. Or, no, maybe the rose. I'd say the rose and the clip are honestly probably about similar in terms of difficulty. I'd say the rose might be a little bit more difficult. So I believe the next power pellet we get, or maybe the next 2, will be the final one in the game. So we're coming up on time very soon here. There's Play-Doh. It's, of course, from Jeremy Kellerman's creation, what you heard Scott referencing earlier when he was talking about that show that Kellerman did with that plate thing. Okay, it's not going to be this power pellet. It's going to be the next power pellet. So we're on the home stretch of the game here. You can see we've just got items dropping left and right. You know, paper clip, plate, tape, biddle. Kind of got a screw chain there with, yeah, a quadruple screw chain right there. So we handled it pretty well, all things considered. Excuse me, I think I'm getting a sore throat today. But we've got 10 respects at this point, so we're pretty set for the rest of the game. We have a nice wide margin of error to get to the next power pellet, which you definitely want when you get to the section of the game because it gets so frantic, so difficult, and there are just so many more opportunities for missed items. Shouldn't have gone for that nut, honestly. I should have just regarded it as dead like I did that Crabbit right there. But what are you going to do? That ring, of course, right there also was dead. Last power pellet should be dropping any... Oh, okay, maybe not. Shortly after this cutscene, though, the last power pellet should be dropping really soon. Now, we are getting down to 5 respects here, so I was getting a bit nervous at this point, you know. But we're at 9,719. Power pellet is coming right up, so there it is. And time. And now, of course, just sit back and witness the ending cutscene. Thank you for joining me. I'm N0rman, signing off.
I did it for you. Thank goodness. We thought we'd lost you there for a moment. click on the direction you want to travel. Make sure you don't steer the ship into any icebergs or seagulls. If a mutiny starts to happen, make sure you use some of the gold distributed evenly among the crewmates. That will pass them. Watch out for snakes. Press start to begin. Open the map to set your destination. Use the compass to navigate. Captain, are you ready to set sail? The crew's getting anxious. Beware, the crew may mutiny if they become restless. To calm your crew, distribute some of the coins from our treasure chest. Use the forward button to sail straight ahead. Use the stop button to drop in. If the Kraken rises, great help with the holy power cannon. Use the direction keys to try to port and start. The signal after the ship. Use the foghorn. Roll energy through some air. At the first sign of scurvy, eat N0rman. Don't get gangrene. Have a glass of wine. Beware sirens on the rocks. Beware the song of the Lorelei. Watch out for snakes. Sea. Is there anyone waiting for you back on land? Feels like a dream. And so select a destination. Use the compass to